When you think of Coco Crisp, you probably think of the cereal, like Coco Krispies, with all little elves on them. If you ask fans in Oakland who watched them in the 2010s, they will probably tell you about a player who was lighthearted, came to play every day ready to give his all, or how a dance song that became a phenomenon in 2013 became his walkout song for the season, and eventually he got his own bobblehead based on the dance. Well, the lean, that is. You become a fan favorite with a born name, Covelli Lois Crisp, aka Coco Crisp. The man, the myth, the Bernie Lean. Covelli was born in LA on November 1st, 1979 to Lois, a former amateur boxer, and Pamela, a former champion sprinter. He was given the nickname Coco from his sister, who would pick on him for looking like one of the characters on the Coco Crispy box. Which one that could be is anyone's guess. The name faded until filing a questionnaire in AA, and players found it funny and eventually, as a joke, put it on the scoreboard, and well, it stuck. He would officially change his name in March 5th, 2013 to Coco Crisp. But back in his younger days, Coco was a part of MLB's Reviving Baseball and Intercities program, and he played on the Senior Division Championship team in LA in 1995. In 1999, he would go on to be drafted in the 7th round by the St. Louis Cardinals. Coco would spend his time in the minors quickly moving up the ranks from 1999 to 2001 and would go on to be St. Louis Cardinals 2001 Minor League Player of the Year. On August 7th, 2002, he would be traded to the Cleveland Indians as a part of a player to be named later for Chuck Finley, who would go on to retire after the season. Coco would go on to make his debut a week later against the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, where he would go 0-4 with a walk, a stolen base, and scoring a run. He didn't really play well in his 32 games, but he did get some playing time, and for the Indians, this was more of a rebuilding phase after the 90s core had left. In 2003, he had below average first year, but that can be expected when he only played 99 games, and he put up a slash line of .266, .302, and .353, hitting 3 home runs and driving in 27, and he also went 15 of 24 on stolen bases. Over the next 2 seasons for the Indians, Coco would go on to really come into his own, as he was now in his mid-20s and the talent was starting to catch up with the experience. He would go on to hit 31 homers and bring in 140 runs, go 35 of 54 in stolen bases, and have a slash line of near 300 with a 345 on base and a 455 slugging. He did have an OPS plus of 114. He was also a really big part of the 05 team that went 93 and 69 and finished 6 games back of the AL Central and World Series champion White Sox. However, that team did miss the playoffs by 2 games that year, thanks in part to last year's champions, the Boston Red Sox. While he was sharing time with the likes of Grady Sizemore in the outfield, that could have really formed a nice left-center combo for the Indians. They did decide to trade him to the Red Sox for a package deal consisting of corner infielder and the number 11th ranked prospect at the time, according to MLB.com, Andy Marte, who ended up being a very well below average hitter at best in his 4 years with the Indians. They also got back reliever Guillermo Mota, who would be DFA'd and released before the end of July, Kelly Shopak, who would have 4 decent seasons as the backstop in Cleveland, and lastly, Randy Newsom, who never made the majors. He was Boston's number 1 option to replace Johnny Damon, who left for free agencies to go to the Yankees, and Chris would go on to sign a 3-year, $15.5 million extension that April. While Boston did win this trade, Chris' time in Boston was not great, but he played a role in the Red Sox winning it all in 2007, in part being the best defender on the team. His time in Boston was mirrored by injuries and almost being run over by an ATV that was being driven by Mariner the Moose, the mascot, in Seattle while leaving the dugout. While Chris played it off, it could have been a considerable issue had he had been hurt. Unfortunately, there's only 1 fan video that I've seen so far of the event, so feel free to look that up in your spare time. But with a young phenom coming up with the likes of Jacoby Ellsbury, his time would be cut short, and Coco would only last 3 seasons, going .271, .333, .390 for a slash line, and his power in those 3 seasons did drop significantly, with him only hitting 21 home runs while driving in 137 runs. The one department Coco excelled in was his base paths, going 70 of 87 in stolen bases, while racking up a 4.9 WAR in his time there. On November 19th, 2008, Coco would be once again traded, this time to the Royals, while on the last year of his 3-year extension for Ramon Ramirez. With the Royals, Coco started out hot, but then tore his labrum in late June and would end his lone season in Kansas City. He would only hit .228 with a .336 batting on base with .378 slugging. With 3 homers and 14 runs batted in, he did go on to have 13 steals and 15 attempts in just 49 games. The now 30 and often injured Coco Crisp was slated for free agency, and his performance had been below average at the plate since leaving Cleveland, and one would think there would not be a lot of suitors for him. Well, there happened to be one for sure in the Oakland Athletics, who offered Coco a 1-year, $5 million deal with a club option to boot for the 2011 season. This was a hodgepodge team where Coco joined the likes of Kurt Suzuki, an aging Ben Sheets, Mark Ellis, former Rookie of the Year Andrew Bailey, and a young Gio Gonzalez. This is not what I'd call a star-studded team, but Coco then started the year on the IL with a broken finger, but other injuries flared up, and he only managed to play 75 games for the entire season. But in those 75 games, Coco put on a clinic on the basepaths with 32 steals in just 35 attempts. This was second on the team only behind Rajai Davis, who had 50 in almost twice as many games. And they would go on to finish a remarkable 81-81 and be the third in the league in stolen bases. Besides steals, Coco would have a resurgence of sorts at the dish, going .279, .342, and .438 for a slash line, hitting 8 homers, the most since 2006, his first year in Boston, while knocking in 38 runs. Coco's option would be picked up at season's end. The 2011 A's did roll in with almost the same exact cast as the year before, and while the team fell short, going 74-88, Coco did come and commit some theft on the base pass, as he stole 49 bases to be exact. This led the AL in 2011. He would go on to have a triple slash line of .264, .314, .379, and add another 8 homers and drive in 54 runs. After the year, they did re-up Crisp to another 2-year deal with a club option for $14 million, and then in 2012, the nobodies, well, they became the somebodies with the additions on the outfield of the likes of one Yoenis Cespedes and Josh Riddick. The 3 would lead the team in WAR for non-pitchers. As a team, they'd win the AL West going 94-68, but as a player, this is where Coco would go on to hit 11 home runs while batting .259, .325 for an OBP, and .418 for slugging. He'd only drive in 46 runs, but he was primarily the leadoff guy or the second in the order, and he'd also add 39 runs while only being caught 4 times. As a team, the A's would play the Detroit Tigers in the divisional series, and then in Game 4, with 2 outs and a runner on second, in the 9th inning, Coco would extend the series just 1 more game, as he would have a walk-off single. Unfortunately, though, they would lose the next night in Game 5, being shut out 6-0. Foolish Baseball has an excellent video about this season as a whole for the 2012 A's, so feel free to check that out. With the youth in full swing for 2013, the A's looked to commit to their success, with the oldest outfielder being Coco Crisp. He took on a leadership role alongside one Josh Donaldson, and at the age of 33, while his defense was slowing down, but at the plate he would probably have his best season of his career in almost a decade by counting categories numbers, and he'd put up a slash line of .261, .335, and .444, hitting a career best 22 home runs, driving in 66 runs, and on top of that, he would go on to add 21 steals. This would give him his only 2020 season of his career. While his numbers weren't nearly as great as Donaldson's, who would finish 4th in the MVP voting, Coco would go on to get a single vote and finish tied for 15th. On top of that, they would go 96-66 and once again finish first in the AL West, but ultimately would lose once again to the Tigers in the divisional series. After 2013, this is where Coco's decline starts, sadly. However, he would still be around for 2.5 more seasons in Oakland, and that time would unfortunately be cut short on August 31st at the post-trade deadline waiver, as he'd be moved to the Indians once again, this time for Colt Haynes, who would never make an appearance with the A's. With the A's, Coco was a staple for the team both in the clubhouse and fans alike, but now with the Indians, he got one last shot to play for a ring, but ultimately came up short in that magical season. While he played okay in his limited time, in Game 7, he would hit a double with one out in the bottom of the third and then be driven in by Carlos Santana to tie the game at 1 before ultimately losing to the Cubs in extra innings in that year's World Series. This would end up being the last game Coco ever played, and ultimately he retired after 15 years when his incentive clause was not picked up. While Coco's career was nothing special as far as stats and accolades, it was remembered for a lot of A's fans. Between the Burning Lean bobblehead giveaway that was inspired by said song and was his walkout song for a while, as I mentioned in the intro, and thanks to the A's subreddit for that, as I, as a Wisconsin guy, had no idea what that was and spent about 15 minutes watching all the skits the A's did with the artist and the fans alike. He also had one of my favorite giveaways I've seen in a cereal bowl giveaway for kids. And then lastly, the A's also had a Coco gnome bobblehead. He was beloved by fans in Oakland. As far as stats go, he is 10th all time in team history for steals, and then also owns the record for the most consecutive steals without being caught in said team history. He spent some time in the broadcast booth in Oakland for a season before moving on to coaching, where in 2022 he was hired as a part of the Nationals players development staff. As for his overall career, it was mired in injuries, ups and downs, and maybe not meeting his overall potential, as he was a speedy outfielder that teams had hoped would go on to average 15 plus homers and 20 plus stolen bases. For his overall stats, he ended his career with a slash line of 265, 327, and 402 with an OPS plus of 96. He would also go on to hit 130 home runs in his career and drive in 304 runners. He added 309 stolen bases while only being caught 79 times, giving him a near 80% success rate. He was, for his career, slightly above average outfielder and an average hitter at best. He was really great on the base paths though, both in the steals department and just taking the extra base when given the opportunity. And while he had a career WAR of 28.9 and he won't make it into the Hall of Fame, or maybe even the A's Hall of Fame at that, it doesn't take away from the fact that he was a fan favorite. I want to give a big thank you to the Oakland subreddit, the Oakland A subreddit that is, for their input in my poll, as well as sharing some events and stories surrounding Coco Crisp that I had not been aware of. I hope you really enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.